In the early 1990s, Rockford Fosgate made a huge technological step forward with their DSM series amplifiers. I have tested a 200 DSM 10 years ago. Check a link in the video description. You can see that test. Really, it blew me away. It was one of the first amplifiers I tested when I got my amp dyno. Had no idea this amp was as powerful as it really was. But let's move on to 1994. Take a look at the Car Stereo Review Buyer's Guide. We're going to flip it to the advertisements and we'll be able to see the Rockford Fosgate ad here showing off the new 1994 I and IX series amplifiers by Rockford Fosgate. These were a generation ahead or newer than the ones I showed in the previous video. Here we have the Punch 200ix at the top. You can see there's several different models, the 100ix, the 60ix, the 40i, later to become the 40ix. The 200ix retailed for $679 back then, which is equivalent to $1,400 in 2024. Wow, that's big money. Well, turns out I actually have one of these in the box. It's not brand new, but at least it does give you the opportunity to see what the box looked like if you went into the store back in 1994 to pick up your amp. You can see it's got the specifications on the amp, got a lot of pictures. Came with a birth sheet or punch verification form. Also came with this pad pack Rockford Fosgate logoed paper, which is very cool. Here's the amp. As you can see, it is wrapped up. This is not factory wrapping, of course, and also I don't have the other accessories which would typically come with it, including the manual, the extra Allen keys, the extra screws, things like that. It does give you an idea of what the amplifier looks like. Again, we've shown off this style amplifier in several videos. I'll link those in the video description below. As far as dimensions go for this one, 12.6 inches for the long side, 9.6 inches for the width, 2.6 inches for the height. Now, if you take the end caps off, it takes about 2.5 inches off that measurement, and you get about 10 inches for the length. I know a lot of people did that back in the day to save space for installation. As far as ratings go, 4 ohms, 100 watts by 2, 2 ohms, 200 by 2, 4 ohms, 400 watts bridge. Those are rated at 12.6 volts, 0.05% THD. The end caps are held on each by 2 captive Allen head bolts. So you take those 2 off of each side here. They're machined, and it's nice that they do stay inside of the end caps. They will not fall out unless you physically force them out. So it's kind of hard to lose those. But these end caps get lost all the time, unfortunately, because people just threw them away back in the day, just did not hold on to them. That makes them very expensive these days. As far as what we have here, the amp, very simple here on one end. We just have a remote connection for turn on of the amp and the power LED. And then we also have the 8-gauge terminals here for power and ground. I really don't know why they didn't use a terminal for the remote connection. That would have been much better instead of having to use a spade style connector. Anyway, they didn't. On the opposite side, we have a lot more options, including the outputs for the speakers. Here are the left, positive, and negative. Treble control at 20 kilohertz. You can adjust that up to 12 dB. The left gain, the right gain, also in the left and right RCA inputs. The bass control is up to 18 dB of 45 hertz boost. Then we have the right speaker, positive and negative. Those are again 8-gauge connections, same as the power and ground. Now we'll have our AI friend give us a description of how these crossover cards work. So here you go.
The crossover functions are controlled through the use of an X card and can be set for high pass, low pass, or full range operation. Each crossover card has 2 faces. One face operates full range, the other has arrows to indicate the edge for selecting HP, high pass, or LP, low pass operation. Orient the card with the desired operating edge, indicated by the arrow, toward the socket terminals inside the amplifier. Firmly, but carefully, plug the card into the socket.
What is it about the British voice? It just makes it sound more fancy. I don't know, but we added it anyway. So here we got the amp all hooked up. We're going to fire up the SMD DeMoore Engineering Amplifier Dyno so that we can test the power output. We'll show the power output in watts on the left, the ohm load in the middle, the voltage on the right, and we'll also have a clamp so we can calculate amps efficiency.
All right, let's do this.
First test will be in stereo as shown here. We're going to hook up both channels, hook it up to the dyno. We're going to do the test at 1 kilohertz. First up, we'll try 4 ohms. It's rated 100 watts by 2 at 12.6 volts at very low distortion. but we're testing around 14 volts with 1% distortion here certified. What can we get? And there you go, 155 watts per channel at 14.14. Now let's skip the clipping because we got very close to the same numbers as we got on the certified test. We did the dynamic run here, 1 kilohertz dynamic burst, 151 watts per channel at 14.22. Now let's move on to the 2 ohm test where it's rated 200 watts by 2 at 12.6. Again, we're going to be providing it more voltage than that, but I just want to keep it consistent here. Certified 2 ohms, we get 250, about 253 their average between the channels, right at 13.93. Now let's try it dynamic and see what we get here. And there you go, 271 watts per channel at 14.2 volts. Next up, we're going to try 1 ohm per channel. Rockford does not recommend this. They probably do not like me even showing this, but everybody who's used these amps knows they can handle it, but don't do it. Just watch what I did. Check this out, 345 watts per channel. That's over 700 watts total, up to 1% distortion. Then dynamically, look at this. We are touching or getting close to 1,000 watts total, over 950 watts total, both channels at 14.12. Now we'll move on to the bridge test. We'll use the left positive, right negative to do these tests. We're going to also do these at 40 hertz instead of 1 kilohertz. 8 ohms mono, 200 watts at 12.6. Again, we're going to be giving it more than that voltage-wise, and we're going to go up to 1% distortion. Let's see here if we can do that 200 very easily. We get 307 at 14.26. Now let's reschedule it here for the dynamic run. Again, this is 40 hertz simulating a subwoofer, and we're right about the same power here. 304 watts, nope, 305 at 14.16. Now let's move on to 4 ohms mono, where it's rated 400 watts at 12.6 volts. See what we get here, 40 hertz track, up to 1% distortion. Can we beat the 400? Easily. Right at 500 watts at 13.99. I know some people who are watching this who see amps today know 500 watts is not a lot of power, but back in the day, this was a big power amplifier back in the 90s. Dynamic, 519, 526, it jumped up at 14.31. Now 2 ohms mono again is not rated. That's 1 ohm per channel stereo for the amp, but we're going to try it anyway because we just like to see these things. And here you go, certified 676 watts, 13.72. What about uncertified to clipping? I think the original 200 DSM I had did almost 900 watts uncertified. We didn't get that much here. We got 688 at 13.67. They may have had some additional throttling built into this model. I'm not sure, but I will find out. Dynamically, here's the 800 watts. Again, this is 40 hertz, but we got closing in on 900, 869. Yep, 869 at 14.18. Here are all the results. Again, the stereo tests were done at 1 kilohertz. The mono tests were done at 40 hertz, and they do not recommend 1 ohm stereo or 2 ohm mono loads on the amp. This amp is 30 years old, so do with it what you wish, but it is not recommended. Now, the test sheet that came with the amp says 248 watts per channel at 2 ohms. We got about 252, so very close. Now let's hear it with some speakers. woofer tested up. So absolutely no complaints overall. The sound quality of the amp sounded great with the ELAC bookshelf speakers, and the bass was immense and incredible with the Savard 6.5-inch subwoofer kicking it. Now, these amps also were known as the barbecue grill, the George Foreman grill amplifiers, and the heat sinks did get kind of hot, but they were doing their job. They're taking the heat away from the amplifier components. Now, also during this time, you could get a link called a punch link to set many of these amplifiers together. In this case, I'm going to show two of the Punch 200s, a 200 and a 200ix together so you can see what they look like. And yeah, it just made it into a longer amplifier. Very cool. These punch links back in the day were $29. Now they sell for like $150 to $200 a piece. Looking inside of the amp, taking off screws at the bottom of the amplifier and one by the RCAs, you can see here we have 3300 microfarad 50 volt Nichicon capacitors for the rails, 330 microfarad 63 volt there on the power supply. You see the Rockford Fosgate division here, and here you can see the X card. This is that crossover card that we talked about earlier. You can see that it does flip around on two different sides. I set it to full range and I left it in full range for all the testing that I did. As previously mentioned, we have tested the Punch 200 DSM. It was many years ago. I will leave links in the video description. We're showing the 200ix today. We do plan on showing the 200X2 in a future video and having a technician on here with us to talk about the differences between these three amps, because there is some differences, and I'm not going to tell you if it gets better or if it gets worse the newer you get in the model line, because these early generations were pretty cool. Overall, I really have fun showing off these vintage car audio amplifiers, showing them with speakers, trying out the power, showing them with subwoofers, just all kinds of fun for me to do this. I urge you guys, if you like these videos, please smash a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe to this channel if you really like them. Use my links in the video description too, that also helps as well. I greatly appreciate you watching. Until next time, this is Big D. I'm out of here. Now, I know this is a long video, but we're going to do more testing. We're going to do 1.33 dynamic burst at 1 kilohertz. That's right, bridged. Crazy load on this amp. We got 1,309 watts at 14.15, but we're not done yet, my friends. We're going to try 1 ohm bridge dynamic power at 1 kilohertz. What can we get? 1,517 watts at 14.14. Man, that was fun. Till next time, Big D, I'm out.